traveling at high speeds, they come back, microns of a second younger than us. So traveling to the future, you can stay on the same timeline, but going into the past, you can't. There's this object orbiting Earth that is estimated to be there for 13,000 years. And how we get this number is the NSA analyzed a signal from it. A couple of astrophysicists analyzed the signal, and some ham radio operators back in the 50s also got the same signal, all independent, came up with the same translation, decoding of the signal, that it was saying it was from the Epsilon Boötis constellation. Now, I heard about this about 10 years ago, and I got really, really interested in the story, and I realized it was even deeper than that, that the article about this came out in Time magazine by one of the astronomers that was researching this thing and decoding the signal. And I said, Time magazine picked this up in 1960. Then I saw some reports of it following Sputnik, when Russians sent Sputnik to orbit the moon and come back. And I said, this thing has course correction. Then they discovered that it was in a polar orbit. It had changed course and went into a polar orbit, something we couldn't do until just recent times. We didn't even know how to get a polar orbit orbiting from pole to pole. In order to create a lot of the megalithic structures that you've seen, like the pyramid complexes and everything else, you need a polar orbit. But this thing has been orbiting in a polar orbit from the 1950s. Everybody was looking up at the sky and tracking things in the sky as we were trying to go in the space race against Russia. And especially when Sputnik launched in 1960, everybody was looking up to the sky. Everybody was scanning the sky. We had some Mercury stuff going on. And the Black Knight satellite, the object itself is interesting because Epsilon Boötis comes up individually several times. So I looked into Epsilon Boötis. I'm like, well, let me research this place. Found out there's something called a void there. This void is called a Boötis void. It's the largest known void in the universe. It's not even dust in this area, going on for about 250 million light years, or some crazy spanning number like that. And so I saw Michio Kaku, the famous theoretical physicist, talking about it. And he said that in that void, it looks like light's being bent around that area. And he says that we think that it's potentially it could be a cloaked advanced civilization. And I was like, that's pretty interesting, because the Black Knight is giving up this location. Now you're saying it might be a cloaked advanced civilization based on, theoretical physicist hypothesis. So I looked into it a little bit deeper and discovered that Boötis is owned by Enlil from the ancient Sumerian tablets. These beings owned planets and moons, and some even owned constellations. Who had crops, who didn't have crops. He can see weather patterns all over the Earth. You can only do that with a polar orbiting satellite. Because as the Earth spins on its axis, the satellite's orbiting this way, and so as the Earth is, as the satellite's orbiting this way, it's taking swaths of data,
right,
and it's scanning topography, it's scanning patterns, it's scanning everything you need, right? Barometric pressures and all that kind of stuff. You can scanning densities, you can scan for population densities. All that can come from one satellite orbiting the planet in a polar orbit. He had that. He knew what was going on, and unfortunately, he was a pretty evil dude. If humans were getting too outrageous in one area, overpopulating an area, he would just have them killed. He would this is in the tablets, just kill them, kill 100,000, kill 200,000. He would dry their crops out. He would spray stuff on their crops and to dry them out so they can starve to death, all this kind of crazy stuff. This guy was just ruthless. He saw us just as animals. He didn't see us as real sentient beings. But this guy owned Boötis. So I said, wait a minute. So the more I dug into it, I realized that the Black Knight satellite, this object that's still orbiting our planet right now, NASA, it's on NASA's server. They call it space junk.
Space junk.
Yeah, they call it space junk. They don't know what it is. It's been there. The STS-88 mission did a flyby and caught a great HD image of this thing. It's about estimated 15 tons.
It's in our orbit.
Oh yeah, it's in our orbit.
So it's not far out. It's not outer space.
No, it's at Lagrange point 4, I believe.
Okay.
And it's orbiting out there, and it's still there. They won't mess with it because it makes no sense to mess with it. You don't know what type of self-defense system or mechanism this thing may have. But the reason why I think it's important, based on what you were telling me about this gentleman, is because I believe that this thing is watching us, and that this could be the grabby civilization that you're talking about, that is watching and making sure we don't get too crazy, because they don't want us to be a threat. They talked about us becoming a threat in the Sumerian tablets. In the myth of Adapa, they talked about it. They talked about it in the Atrahasis epic. They talked about it in the Epic of Gilgamesh. All these tablets, they talk about us potentially rising up and even superseding them, and making sure that we never found out that we don't need them. This is an ancient tablets, and now finding out that he is the constellation of Boötis is attributed to Enlil, and this thing gives off the signal to Boötis. Wow, what is going on here? There is a situation that began to happen during World War II where they discovered that the Nazis had went down to Antarctica and built the base down there, New Schwabenland. And they were like, wait a minute, why in the world would they go to this desolate place? What's down there that they would want to go through the harsh weather and risk everything, risk even their lives to be down there and build a base? Now, there's an incredible story that was in Admiral Byrd's diary that was found by his kids, where he said he flew into an area that opened up at Antarctica, and he went into an area where it was lush and tropical almost. And as he got into this area, this is according to his own diary, people can look this up, something took over his plane, and these two UFO-type craft, circular craft, flying saucers came, and it took over his craft, and it guided him in to this area where they landed. And then they took him to meet somebody that he calls in his diary the Master. Pretty interesting story. And according to this account, the Nazis had gotten help to create these craft called the Hanabu. They had 4 versions of this craft, these circular disc craft, from these people down there. The guy, this Master, told him that they were wary of the nuclear bombs that had just, been utilized, dropped the nuke on Japan and so forth, and they were wary of our experimentation with nuclear devices and wars because they're sharing this planet as well. Pretty interesting story. And so, all of a sudden, Admiral Byrd's going down there with a fleet, not just a small fleet. He took over 3,000 people with him. This was a huge expedition. It was a military expedition. When he got down there, they had a situation where some of these flying objects were attacking some of their ships and actually destroyed some of them. Sent him back home packing with his tail between his legs. This is one of the top admirals, literally the top admiral in the world at the time for the United States military. He said that we have a new enemy that can fly from pole to pole with extreme speed. Why would he make a statement like that? And then all of a sudden, these Nazi, they are rumored to have these craft, which some of the designs have been found, called Hanabu. And these Hanabu craft had the capability of utilizing a couple different forms of propulsion. One was jets, so they could take off vertically. They had little jets that would thrust and take off vertically, but then from there they can shoot off horizontally. Well, they were using a device that was spinning in the center of the craft, and what it appears to be is they began to copy technology from the ancient Indian Vedas, because Hitler was sending his people all around the world to get knowledge on ancient technology. That's how they found these people in Antarctica. He even sent people to Tibet, Nazis to Tibet, to talk to the people in Tibet to find out about this ancient technology. He found out about Vimanas, and these people supposedly in Antarctica helped him develop a couple of them, where they use a ferrofluid vortex engine. A ferrofluid is a liquid metal like mercury. And in the ancient Indian Vedas, if you take mercury and rotate it at a high rotation, a high RPM, and electrify it, you get something called anti-gravity. So he was utilizing something that had rotating discs underneath these round craft, according to eyewitness accounts, and also the schematics that were discovered during the collapse of Nazi Germany. And it's pretty interesting that I think besides the uranium that's down there in Antarctica, which obviously you know what uranium's used for, right? Mm-hmm. Nuclear power plants and also nuclear weapons. There's mountains. Admiral Byrd said there were mountains of coal with no ice caps. No ice caps, his exact words. And I can give you a copy to this video. His own mouth is saying, no ice. Mountains of coal that could satisfy the world's need for coal for a very, very, very long time. Also, there's plutonium down there. Again, so uranium and plutonium, we know that if you have a high level of plutonium and uranium, it's one of the easier elements that you can separate the atoms. You can split atoms very easily, which makes it high use for weaponry and also power plants. So that's why the government wanted access down there. That's why the Germans wanted access down there. And that's why after Germany fell, we had Project Paperclip, where we took all the scientists from Germany that had learned all this wisdom and knowledge, and we brought them to America. People think Project Paperclip was just a small number of Nazis. We took over 2,000 Nazis with us and brought them to America and put them in positions of power over technology companies, the CIA, the space program at NASA, and so forth and so on. and we began to develop these technologies. So in a weird kind of way, America became the Fourth Reich, to be honest with you. And I know that they were developing at the time Hanaboo number 4, which supposedly Hitler never got killed. He escaped in Hanaboo number 4 to Argentina, which is very, very close to where? Antarctica. If you look at Google Sky right now on the computer and look down on Antarctica, you'll find bases from research bases from every major country in the world there. And you'll also find the Rockefeller Foundation base as well. So Admiral Byrd was right. All the technology and research, it's the #1 place in the world for technology research is right down there in Antarctica. I believe that as the ice is melting, they're finding remnants of an ancient civilization. We know that Antarctica was not a frozen tundra for 12 million years, like mainstream science says 12 million years to build up all this ice. No, that's not accurate. We know this because of the Perry Reese map. The Perry Reese map shows Antarctica what it looked like without ice on it, and that's not even that old. So we know that Antarctica shifted into that spot. How? Because we know that Antarctica is surrounded by tectonic plates. And so that landmass was on a plate that slipped and there was something called a pole shift of the crust of the Earth, which shifted it from a more habitable climate into the position it is now. And that's why the animals that are being uncovered from the ice were flash frozen with undigested food in their stomachs. And there's an entire advanced civilization there, including some of the largest pyramids on Earth, right in Antarctica. Like they make the one at Giza, the Great Pyramid, look like, a dune buggy. I mean, these things are super massive. There's only a couple things we know, like one of the pyramids is 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers of base.
Oh, wow.
The height is just, it's massive. It's way up there. Like, it's in the thousands of feet. But also, one former military person that was a source for Linda Moulton Howe, this was on a documentary she was in. She said that source told her, after going down there for research, I guess in private security, that it was still emitting some type of exotic energy, which is pretty interesting because that was the second time I heard a statement like that. The first time was on a documentary that came on Discovery Channel about the Bermuda Triangle when they found those pyramids off the coast of Cuba down there, right? Which is clearly scanned. Everybody knows that they exist. But this guy was taking he would get off the boat and take like a dinghy out to float to the center area. And he said the same thing. Some type of exotic energy was draining his batteries on his cameras. He had to try 3 times to get this thing recorded properly. He said exotic energy. And what's interesting is if you take a perfect line and draw it from the tip of the Bermuda Triangle, the center of the Bermuda Triangle, straight through the Earth, you come out at the Yonaguni Pyramid at the Dragon's Triangle in Japan, which is also rumored to have disappearances and exotic energy and all this other crazy stuff. So in some way, these pyramid structures around the world are all linked with potentially portals of some type or energetic portals.
The Antarctica Treaty. Do you know about this?
Yeah, that treaty was to allow peaceful collaboration of research and science down there. No war zone. You can actually go down there. There's a guy who's got a new show on my TV network his name is Brad Olson. It's called The Secrets of Antarctica. He went down there, and so we're documenting the whole thing. He went down there. He pulled up on the research facilities. He had to get approval to come on land. They wouldn't let him inside of the facilities, but he did get a chance to go down there. So people who say it's impenetrable and no civilian can get there, that's actually not true. You actually can. It's very expensive and it's very taxing on the body, but you can get down there. And so it's pretty interesting. So that'll be coming out soon. But there's an opening next to these research facilities. And this is why I believe they made this treaty, this sharing of information treaty or whatever. There's a 30-meter wide opening there. You can see it on the Google Sky thing. And what's interesting, on Google Earth, I'm sorry. And when you look at it, like, what's in there? Now, why are they over here? And why are they so close to this gigantic opening? What's in there? I think the answer is whatever Admiral Byrd came across, or whatever they're coming across, I think it's linked. I think there's a remnant of an ancient civilization in there that possibly is still there, and they're in communication with them, in my opinion. Another thing that backs this up, I took a remote viewing course with Major Ed Dames, Project Stargate, former CIA, United States. And his project was for remote viewing. So I took a course with him several years. He was my actual teacher, my direct teacher. It wasn't like I was under some other people that worked with him. No, he was my direct teacher. There's pictures of me with this man. And he told me that there's beings that have easy and free access to come and go as they please from Antarctica. At one of these classes, class was over. It was like a 10-hour class. We were just sitting around talking, having a casual conversation. He told me a few other things, but that was one of the things that kind of stood out. And he says they come and go as they please because nobody can stop them.
Are you familiar with the bell?
The Nazi bell, the Die Glock?
Yes.
Yeah. The Die Glock is an amazing device that was being developed by the Nazis during World War II. This Die Glock, again, technology that they learned about through an advanced civilization that they were in communication with through the Thule Society. This Thule, Thule, Thule Society, they were using psychics to channel information from an advanced alien race. And they were taking this knowledge and then turning it into actual real workable technology. And so they had this thing in Germany called the henge, where they had these gigantic stone pillars in the shape of a henge. And they had the Die Glock in the middle. It looked like an acorn, a UFO type, but an acorn shaped UFO. And it had these multi-counterclockwise spinning pieces on it that was spinning all different ways. The ultimate purpose of it seems to have been some type of time travel. And this thing at one point, based on eyewitness accounts, it's turned on and activated and it disappeared from the henge. It was seen like, I forget how many decades later. I think it crashed somewhere in Virginia or something, according to these accounts. I got to look that up to make sure I'm not making a mistake there. But it reappeared later, and it crashed somewhere, I believe, in the Americas. And this thing was the same exact shape and description as the Die Glock. And what was it for? I believe that they were trying to tap into time travel so that they can go back in time and change the past so they can have a Nazi-dominant future. You see, they wanted to alter realities. The only problem with going back in time they didn't take into consideration is that if you go back in time, you can't alter the future reality that you existed in on the same timeline. Because when you go back in time, you shift into a different alternate timeline altogether, allowing you to go back in time in the first place and see even yourself. So it's like the grandfather paradox, right? If you go back in time and kill your grandfather, how in the world were you born to go back in time to kill your grandfather? Well, the answer is you shift into an alternate timeline. Now, going into the future, you stay on the same timeline. We know this because time travel into the future happens every day. Even when you get on an airplane, you travel into the future based on relativity. The person standing still on the ground and you moving across the sky in a plane, we know that you're moving forward in time by microns of tenths of a second, but you moving in time. Same thing with astronauts when they travel into space. We know for a fact that because they're traveling at high speeds, they come back microns of a second younger than us. So traveling to the future, you can stay on the same timeline, but going into the past, you can't. So that whole thing would have failed anyway.